In a busy garage on the edge of Dayton, Ohio, steel custom motors roared with life. Sparks flew, engines hummed, and grease-stained mechanics shouted over the noise of power tools. It was a place where broken dreams on four wheels came to be revived. At the center of it all stood Rick Steele, the boss, a man with calloused hands, a sharp tongue. Oh dear, and the kind of pride that filled up a room before he did. He ran his shop like a general, and no one dared challenge his command. Among the crew was a quiet presence few paid attention to. Kayla Jennings. Just 21, she worked in the shadows, sweeping, sorting bolts, fetching coffee. Most of the guys didn't even bother learning her name. To them, she was just the kid, or worse, tool girl. But if they looked closer, they'd notice she never missed a step. She knew where every socket was, knew when a motor was running too hot just by sound, and always paused when passing by an engine like she could hear its story. Kayla was the daughter of Donnie Jennings, one of the finest mechanics the garage had ever seen, until cancer took him 2 years earlier. Donnie had been Rick's friend and mentor once, but as Donnie slowed down from illness, Rick became distant, focused more on business than people. Kayla, left with her father's tools and notebooks, quietly stepped into the garage world, unnoticed and unproven. One hot Wednesday afternoon, a wealthy client rolled into the garage in a luxury flatbed truck. Inside was a rare European V12 engine, fried, locked, and labeled unfixable by every high-end shop from Detroit to Nashville. The man offered double pay to anyone who could get it running again. Rick took the challenge personally. He and his top 2 guys worked on it for hours, then called in a specialist. But the computer wouldn't connect, the cylinders were jammed, and the diagnostics threw errors they couldn't read. After a full day of failed attempts, frustration simmered in the air. Rick, irritated and looking for a laugh, turned to Kayla. "Hey, kid," he said, waving a greasy wrench in her direction. "You think you can do better?" The garage chuckled. Kayla looked up from the shelf she was organizing, her expression unreadable. "Sure," she said softly, "if you don't mind me trying." That quiet confidence silenced the room. Rick blinked, then shrugged. "Have at it, can't make it worse." With that, Kayla approached the engine like it was an old friend. She didn't rush. She pulled out a canvas roll of tools from her backpack, worn and clearly used. From her back pocket, she slid out a thick, stained notebook. Her father's. Pages were filled with hand-sketched diagrams, weird calculations, and notes in faded ink. She flipped to one marked V12 compression faults, variant engines. The guys watched her closely at first, waiting for her to break something or stall out, but instead she moved with focus. She cleaned the intake manually, and found a small fracture in the throttle valve others had missed, and gently tapped a stuck piston ring back into place, using a technique her dad had once shown her in their garage at home. No flashy tools, no computers, just touch, instinct, and knowledge passed down in grease and ink. Hours later, Rick was ready to call it. "That's enough," he began. Then she tightened the last bolt, connected the ignition coil, and turned the key. The engine didn't cough or shudder. It roared, clean and smooth. No one said a word. The impossible had been undone by the one person none of them had ever taken seriously. And Rick Steele, for the first time in a long time, had nothing to say. The next morning, Steele Custom Motors felt different. The air wasn't as loud with banter, and the usual arrogance among the mechanics had turned to quiet curiosity. Word had spread faster than exhaust smoke. Kayla, the girl who used to clean the shop floors, had brought a dead V12 engine back to life. Not just any engine, but one even the experts couldn't figure out. Clients started calling to ask about the girl who fixed the impossible. Rick Steele stood in his office staring through the window at Bay 4. Kayla was there early, as usual, organizing her father's tools with the same methodical precision that had stunned everyone the day before. She didn't act like anything was different, didn't expect applause. That made it worse for Rick. She hadn't just fixed the engine, she'd quietly shaken the foundation of everything he thought he knew. He stepped out of his office and called her name. Kayla wiped her hands on a rag and followed him inside. "You really fixed it," Rick said, more like a statement than a question. Kayla nodded. The problem was in the airflow mapping. The computer couldn't detect it because the foreign system overrides diagnostics. My dad made notes on that kind of failure a few years ago. Rick looked at the old, grease-smudged notebook she placed on the desk. Flipping through it, he saw pages of detailed sketches, theories, and custom solutions Donnie had never shared when he worked here. It wasn't just a notebook. It was a legacy, one Kayla had been preserving in silence. "He taught you all this?" Rick asked. Kayla hesitated, then replied, "Most of it. The rest I figured out by listening. Engines talk if you pay attention." Rick leaned back in his chair, chewing on that idea. There was a time when he used to think the same way, back when passion, not pride, drove his work. He saw that part of himself in Kayla now, only sharper, purer, less hardened by ego. "You want a real job?" he asked. "I don't want a title or a name tag," Kayla said calmly. "I just want a bay, my own space to work." Rick stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "You've earned it." By the end of the day, Bay 6 had a new sign, Kayla's Corner. The other guys didn't know what to make of it. Some stayed quiet, others offered half-hearted congratulations, but a few started to ask her questions, real ones. How she diagnosed engine knock without a scope, how she knew to rebalance torque timing manually. Kayla answered patiently, just like her dad used to. Soon, cars began coming in with impossible problems, blown blocks, mismatched imports, vintage puzzles no one wanted to touch. And one by one, Kayla took them on. She wasn't just fixing engines, she was rewriting the garage's standards. Her bay, once overlooked, became the heart of the shop. Rick watched it all unfold, a strange mix of pride and humility growing in him. He hadn't just discovered a talented mechanic, he had rediscovered the soul of his garage. And it didn't come from chrome or horsepower. It came from a young woman who carried her father's legacy in her hands, her head, and her heart. One night, long after the shop had closed, Rick passed by Kayla's bay. She was still there, tinkering under the hood of a '68 Camaro. He paused, then said softly, "Your dad would be proud." Kayla didn't stop working. She simply smiled and replied, "I know. That's why I'm here." In a world full of noise and noisemakers, Kayla had done the unthinkable. She let her work speak first. And in doing so, she reminded everyone that real skill doesn't need to be announced. It just needs a chance. And now she had hers.